he just got a job recently. He's like, yeah, like I'm the youngest by like 8 years. Like they call me like the new guy, like the kid, and he's 30, and he's like, yeah, like this is just, I know I'm young for this job and this position, and I'm just like, it's crazy the difference in like the entertainment world compared to the real world, where it's like, he's the young pup in the industry now. People think like he's the young kid. For me, it's like, you go 2-3 years, and it's like, like people meme on Nick Palm all the time. They're like, this guy's the old, and maybe it's because the way he acts, but like, oh, he's old, blah 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 stuff. But he's like 32. It's like he's not old at all. Like, but in the streaming industry, people think he's dirt.
I mean, do people? What is the connotation of being old though? What does that mean? Like, what's the significance of that?
I think it's just more so it's really hard for you to relate to, like when you're a 20-year-old, do you want to listen to a 30-year-old? No, you want to listen to a 20-year-old. So I think it's just more so like, are later people, like people in their late 20s to 30s, coming to Twitch or coming to our industry? No, they're leaving to get married, to have jobs, to have kids, etc. When the young and 20-year-olds and stuff like that, they're, who are entering this area because they have the time to watch Twitch, they're watching, they're not going to want to watch a 32-year-old man, a 30-year-old man.
I mean, I think yes and no. I mean, I'm 40.
Yeah.
I think it just depends on...
It depends on your content.
Depends on your content,
yeah.
And also, like, being what you are, right? So, like, if you're a 28-year-old streamer, like, you've got a little bit more gravitas.
You think so?
I think so.
Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I just think that people are more so, like I think when I was a high schooler and someone said, like, I'm 23, I'd be like, dude, you're an old man. I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's like, how old do you think your audience is? What's the average age of your audience? I gotta think that they're older.
I'd say the average person my chat's probably like 20.
Yeah, so look, here's the cool thing about Twitch and streaming, right? Is like, look, the world is fucked in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And no one knows like what to do anymore. So I was like looking at information about inflation and the cost of buying a home. So apparently like 20 years ago, a $400,000 house, if you bought it based on interest rates and things like that, like would cost you about $600,000 over the course of the life of the interest that you pay. And now something like a $400,000 house costs you like $1 million over the course, just based on interest rates and things like that.
Yeah, I was talking to my chat and I'm just like, I don't understand, and maybe you know more because I'm not in the world. How are people my age, or how are they even remotely thinking they can live a life?
They can't. That's the problem. So just to give you a couple of other examples, this is kind of staggering, but between 1989 and 2016, or maybe 1990 to let's say like 2015, the amount of perfectionism that people experience went up by about 32%.
What's that mean?
So perfectionism is characterized by a desire to do well, but with unreasonable expectations and a lot of self-judgment.
And is that from social media?
We'll get to that. So then there's 3 subtypes of perfectionism. So perfectionism has gone up by about 30 some odd %. Okay. So that's like staggering. Like for something in medicine to increase by 30% over the course of 20 to 30 years is unheard of. Yeah. Like cancer, for example, or heart disease or whatever, like nothing is increasing by like 30%. Actually, maybe autism spectrum, but there's some other issues with that. The interesting thing is that if you look at perfectionism, there are 3 types of perfectionism. There's internally saying like, I want to be perfect and I'm holding myself to my internal standard. There is sort of like an external perfectionism where I want to be perfect for someone else. Maybe this is a better way to put it. You can want to be perfect for yourself. You can want to be perfect for someone else. And there's a 3rd type of perfectionism, which is society expects me to be perfect and I cannot be. So this is not a particular person. This is not like I'm doing this to make mommy or daddy happy. Yeah. This is fundamentally believing that what society expects of me, I cannot achieve. And I'm just not good enough. That is the subgroup of perfectionism that has gone up by almost 50%. So what's happening is we have, and this was back in like 2015, okay? So we're talking about like, and things have only gotten worse over the last 10 years. So something is going on where society is expecting us to be something, and more and more and more people are believing that they cannot achieve it. So this is like, and I think this is huge. Does social media have something to do with that? Certainly.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is social media paints you a picture of what your life should be, even though no one's life is actually like that. I think a couple of things that we're seeing is that I think that there was a lot of like, I mean, it's really hard to be a woman for so many different reasons on the internet today.
Yeah.
I think though that women sort of they had to tackle this problem like 50, 60 years ago when sort of feminism emerged and stuff like that. And I think it was all good. I'm not saying it's bad in any way, but a lot of women had to sort of figure out, okay, what kind of woman do I want to be in this world? Do I want to be a professional woman? Do I want to be a parent? Do I want to have kids? Do I not want to have kids? Is that okay? And there's all kinds of negative judgments that we saw and still today see for women, which is like, you know, people will ask women, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? It's sort of assumed that in order to be a successful woman, you have to have kids. On the flip side, we also kind of pinch them on the other side, which is kind of like, okay, so being a stay-at-home mom is like also not quite as respectable because you're not a boss babe and stuff like that. Women get kind of caught in the middle. I think the interesting thing is that the same thing is happening to men, but we haven't quite realized it yet.
Oh, I totally agree.
So what's happening right now with the expectations of men, and this is what's really interesting, if you look at suicide research, and I was trying to figure this out because men commit suicide at a rate that's about 4-1 to women.
Really? I didn't
Absolutely.
know that.
There's also some interesting, disturbing research.
Is it young men or is it just like...
Yeah, young men. I mean, so suicide is the number one cause of death for example, I think Asian people between the age of like 18 and 24. Because Asian kids are risk averse, but they like were really harsh on themselves.
Yeah.
But I think what's going on with men is that we're given expectations that we can no longer meet. So for example, like if you're trying to date and people like let's assume a heteronormative relationship, if you date a woman, there's a decent chance that the woman will want you to earn more than them.
Yeah.
But that's becoming increasingly difficult. So like we're holding men to standards that I think are not viable. Yeah. And we just haven't. So society has changed, and I think it's changed for the better. I think like equality is a good thing. I think what needs to change with it though is expectations around equality. So
I agree with that.
Like, you know, if you tell people like, hey, if you're a 17-year-old boy and you say, when they ask you what do you want to be when you grow up, you're not allowed to say stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
I don't want a career. I just want to spend time with my kids and like not do anything. And thankfully I have a couple of friends who are stay-at-home dads and they do great. And there's like, you know, there are amazing relationships out there where people do that.
But is it even possible? That sounds like such an unrealistic thing with how society is to say, I want to be a stay-at-home dad, and finding a partner that is so financially stable that they can be a stay-at-home dad.
Well,
I mean, you got to be making like $250,000 like a year as a woman, right? Because aren't kids more expensive more than ever? Getting a home is almost impossible.
I mean, getting a home is certainly becoming increasingly impossible, but I mean, I think there are a lot of families who survive off of like $70,000 a year.
Yeah, but
right.
Isn't it like it's just getting, I feel like, increasingly more impossible to do that.
It's becoming increasingly impossible. So that's why, 50% of people under the age of 30 are living with their parents.
Yeah, it is.
You seem like unhappy, like you seem not the best. Are you okay? Like for realsies?
Oh, in terms of my mental health?
Yeah, like, are you doing okay? Like,
I mean, truthfully, I would say, last year it's almost like it went in the negatives. I actually don't even know how I'm alive.
Sure.
But it's definitely better. I mean, there was a time, I mean, maybe I'm just I'm not, there was a time last year where, like, I tried killing myself. So it was like, it doesn't get much worse than that, right?
Of course.
But, what is this? It's October. Last year was October is when it happened last year. I try not to think like, is my mental, to answer your question, is my mental health as good as it was 3-4 years ago? No. I mean, I think my mental health has gotten worse every year since I started streaming. And I think that's a lot of streamers. It's just over years, the more you do it, you just get worse and worse mental health. Which I think is also our fault, but yeah, I do think I'm better. I'm obviously better than I was in last October. I mean, it's like I was at -30, and I would say on a scale of 1 to 100 now, I'm at like a 20.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
You know, and sometimes it spikes, and sometimes I feel better, but I would say it's around a 20 out of 100. I don't know if that's a good thing to.
I mean, it's progress in the right direction, right? And I hear that you're coming. I mean, I think there's a lot of important questions like that streamers in general like need to ask, right? So like, what do you want your life to look like? You were kind of saying 30. I think it's easy to say 30 is a good time to stop because it's a number that feels really far away, but then we kind of creep up on it. And I think that the biggest thing is, I mean, I don't think that, I mean, I think you can take a break from streaming or cut back streaming or stop streaming to change your life. That's absolutely possible. But I think a lot of it's like internal.
And I think a lot of times the problem I have with that idea, even like, I know this is the truth, I just won't admit it to myself, is you say to yourself, oh, well, you know, that's when you're going to start enjoying life and this and that. And it's weird. I have this actual picture in my head of like being at a beach, and that's basically how I envision, like, okay, well, when I'm done, I'm really going to be able to just relax. But I just feel like there's just going to be a huge void. You know, I work 100 hours a week. I don't stop working, whether it's on all my businesses, on Twitch and other stuff. I work all day. And you go from that to saying, okay, well, now you're doing about 10 hours a week. It's like, I just think there's just going to be such a void. When you're in your 30s, it's just like, what else are you going to do for hours on end that is going to fill that void? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing that we're starting to see is like, we used to always talk about midlife crises.
Mm-hmm.
And this too was also something that, at least in the media and stuff, is portrayed as mostly men. You know, they'll buy a sports car or whatever, like when they're starting to bald and whatnot.
Bro,
and what?
That's what I did with my R8.
What does that mean?
I bought an Audi R8, and I bought it when I started feeling like I was, looking older.
I can't tell when you're trolling.
No, I'm not trolling. I'm serious. I got out of a relationship and I bought an Audi R8, and I was like, you know what? Like, that was kind of a moment. But yeah, it wasn't a midlife crisis, more like a quarter life crisis. But yeah,
that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think we now have an early life crisis. And by the way, for the record, I don't necessarily think that buying a car after a breakup is a bad idea. I think one of the interesting things, I've been doing a ton of research on how men manage their emotions. Mm-hmm. And one of the key things I'm discovering is that I think a lot of the assumptions that we have about how we manage our emotions are incorrect. So if we look at, like, there's this idea that talking about our emotions is the gold standard for managing them. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the historical research on when we discovered that talking about your emotions is the best way to handle them, it's actually like the populations that we were looking at were predominantly women. So 70% of patients, generally speaking, who engage in psychotherapy are women. 70% of psychotherapists are women. So I think what happened is we sort of looked at, like, okay, what works, but we were looking at a lopsided sample. So I've seen like a lot of interesting explorations into emotion that are more physical or whatever. Like men, for example, do this thing called the negative expression of a positive affection, which means that negative expression. So I'm going to give you shit about something when I'm proud of you. So like if you start dating someone, I'm going to call you whipped. And like all of your friends will be like, man, you're so whipped. But what we really mean is we're proud of you and we're happy for you, but we just don't know how to say that.
Right.
So there are different kinds of norms, but I think one thing that's really interesting, I was doing some research on trauma and like how to heal trauma. And there are more and more like mind-body interventions, things like EMDR. There's something called the emotional freeing technique, which I thought was bullshit. Like 10 years ago, there's really no data to support it. But over the last 10 years, there's like some data that suggests that tapping on different acupuncture points on people's body helps release trauma. Which, like I said, 10 years ago, I didn't really put a whole lot of stock into, but now there's a couple of meta-analyses that really show that that kind of stuff works. So buying an Audi may not be a bad idea. So the interesting thing is that as we go up Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we get food and shelter and whatever, and we move towards the top of the pyramid, which is like self-actualization and happiness, there's an assumption that things get easier. So from a physical standpoint, things get easier, but I think that from a mental standpoint, things become harder.
Right.
There's a reason why very few people achieve self-actualization. It's because it's hard. So one thing is, I'm with you that life has become easier in a lot of ways and we don't really know what we're doing. The second reason I think we don't know what we're doing is because we've stopped spending time with ourselves. So if you look at where is the attention of my mind, mostly it's outside of me. So I'm looking at this thing, I'm buying this thing, I have this insecurity. I think getting a dog will make me happier. I think getting rid of a dog will make me happier. We look to the external world to fulfill our internal needs. And what used to happen 100 years ago is like we did a lot more rote labor. Like we used to do things like, my grandmother would churn butter. Like it's crazy. Like I saw this gigantic jar where they would churn butter, and I did it for like 5 minutes. I was like, this is fucking tiring, and it's like I don't even have any butter yet. Like it was crazy. And so the interesting thing is, as we've externalized our attention, I think we lose touch with ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we sort of think, okay, this thing is going to make me happier, this thing is going to make me happier, this thing is going to make me happy. And we never look inside to see like what actually makes us happy. And then we go on chasing things. And then since we don't know what we want, we can't find a direction in life. And when we don't have a direction in life, then we go on filling our lives with what we should do. I should go become an electrical engineer. I should do this. This will make me happy. And then we end up 25, 26, and we've done everything that we're supposed to. Or in your case, you're 28 and you're a successful streamer, right? Mm-hmm. And then you wake up one day and you're like, I'm actually not super happy yet. Like, now what? Because I thought I did everything that I was supposed to do. I did everything that the world told me to do. I have this coveted job that a lot of people would, or I'm sure you're grateful, and like a lot of people covet what I have, and yet I'm not happy. And
I mean, I would say that I would say the word is happy. Like I do look around, I'm like, wow, like I like my opportunity and like who I am is insane. I do think I'm relatively happy, but I think the one thing that you said that is true is it's just so hard to like how do you look inside yourself? As weird as it sounds, I feel like I'm like the avatar, but like how do you actually take the time to look inside yourself instead of just, because the problem is now is there's just so many distractions to like, you were like, okay, let me look inside myself, but first let me check Twitter, right? So it's like you never really want to take the time to actually do anything or think for yourself, because you could just fill that void with something else. You know what I mean?
So I think the biggest challenge to looking inside yourself is, so when the brain wants something, it induces cravings. So it actually, your brain induces discomfort to encourage you to engage in particular behavior. So what a lot of people don't realize is I think boredom is a craving.
Like we want it?
No, boredom is a sign of a craving. So when your brain craves, let's say, dopamine, it induces boredom.
Oh, okay.
So the problem is that anytime we try to look inside ourselves, it's boring.
Yeah.
So the most important thing that you need to learn how to do if you want to look inside yourself is tolerate boredom, which is really hard to do.
I feel like it's so hard to do now.
Yes.
Because you're just like...
Because we're deconditioned. So it's kind of like we've been riding the elevator like our whole lives.
Yeah.
And so like now it's like really, really tiring to go up a flight of steps.
Yeah. No, that's
what's happening to our mind.
Yeah.
Is we're just constantly getting like dopamine from various things, and now we're too deconditioned.
See, what I would love, dude, is to not have as many thoughts.
Yeah.
That I feel like just kills me. And the problem I have truly is didn't have a lot. I've always been like, my brain's just a bunch of fireworks, but the trauma from last year has just made my brain, it's almost like when I have nothing to think about, the only thing I think of is something bad is probably happening. Dig in your brain hard enough to figure out what that bad thing is, or you're going to combust.
So you need to tell me what level you want to engage with that problem at. We can fix the problem on the level in which it exists, or we can fix the problem at a level beneath that.
Wouldn't we want to go as deep as possible?
I think so.
Right.
So I'll give you just a simple example. So if we look at mental illness has different mechanisms. Someone who has schizophrenia has something different going on in their brain to someone who has bipolar disorder.
Right.
Different from someone who has ADHD. These are all discrete pathologies in the brain. Let's just call it that for now. Okay. There's a philosophical argument against that. And so it's interesting because meditation is the one evidence-based treatment that works for, well, psychotherapy as well. But let's say meditation is the one evidence-based treatment that works for all mental illnesses.
It's funny. I think people hear the word meditation and they think like almost fairy tale. Like it just doesn't sound real. Or like especially for men, maybe they think like, oh, that's like, not something I need to do. Does that make sense?
It's not something you need to do. You can do it if you want, but yeah, I think there's a lot of mysticism and like weird floofy stuff about meditation. I don't think it's any of that stuff that people talk about. I think it's much more simple than that. But the interesting thing, the reason that meditation works for all these illnesses is because it transcends mind. All of these illnesses exist within the mind. So if we look at psychotherapy, what we try to do is we operate within mind and we try to fix it. But meditation transcends mind. And I don't mean literally, I don't mean like that in like like the energies of the universe and like transcend your energy. I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a mystical way. What I mean is literally we are stopping the activity of mind. Yeah. We are putting yourself in a state of consciousness in which there is a cessation of thought and oftentimes cessation of emotion. So you are existing without thoughts.
That would be awesome.
That's what we're going to teach you.
That's why I used to take Adderall.
Yes.
It's because it stopped. It would make my brain go to like.
Absolutely. So if we look at the mechanism of Adderall, what Adderall does is stimulates, because it speeds up our brain, right? Which is kind of confusing because I have so many thoughts. How am I stimulating my brain and it slows down? We speed up our brakes.
Speed up our brakes.
We strengthen the brakes in our mind. So we have a gas pedal and we have the brakes. So actually what we're stimulating is the strength of our brakes.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it slows down our thoughts because then we can put the brakes on all these excess thoughts. But going back to this, so close your eyes. All right, so notice your thoughts. But you are not your thoughts. Your body has changed. You used to be like a foot tall, right? You've also, worked out recently. So you're like getting swole, so your body is changing. You've got this scar. Sounds like you're balding a little bit. Right, so these are all fluctuations within you. You're 28, you used to be 26. You're terrified of that, so be it. We'll get to that eventually. So here's the crazy thing. The one thing about you that has never changed at your low points when you were at a -30, now when you're at 20, and back 5 years ago when you were at 100. The one thing that has never changed is you have experienced all of it. You are that which experiences. You're not the experience itself. You are the thing that experiences everything in your life. Does that make sense? So you don't experience what I experience, and I don't experience what you experience. We can have the same thought. We can have the same desire. We can have all kinds of similar things. We can have the same emotion. But you experience your life and I experience mine. That is the foundation of who you are. So it's like the problem is that what we are is we're like a monitor. And the monitor displays stuff, but the monitor isn't what it displays. The water on the monitor is not wet, right? So this is what's weird, is that you're actually none of those thoughts. All of those worries that you have, oh my God, I'm 28, I'm balding. That's just thoughts. That's all it is. You get that? It's a thought and it's emotion. It's not you. Literally what it is a fear, an insecurity. It's an object of the mind. It is not a person. A person is that which experiences. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
What are you taking away from this? Where are you right now?
Whenever I close my eyes for a while, I picture myself killing myself, so I hate doing it.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's rough.
That sounds kind of scary.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Okay. I think it's okay for us to talk about that. I don't think we should talk about that on stream.
No, that's fine. I mean, they already know. They know. I mean, it's just trauma.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like I don't know how to describe it. It's just from last year. I will close my eyes and I'll just picture different ways of dying. It's crazy.
Okay. Have you spoken to a medical professional about that?
No. I did for a while, but I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I tried a few doctors, and I just felt like every time it was like they don't they just don't get what I do. They're just, and a lot of times I'd talk to them and it'd be like Zoom call number 53, and they always have, how do you doctors make $500,000 a year and you have, the worst fucking cameras and microphones? It's like, I don't understand. You go through like 8 years of schooling, and then they're like, here's your C970 and make sure you use that as your microphone. And I'll be like, yeah, dude, like I tried killing myself, my life was miserable. They're like, yeah, so like what you want to do here? And I'm just like, I can't listen to these people, so I honestly would rather just not do it. It's
What do they say is what you want to do here?
Oh, a lot of times I talk to them and they just be like, yeah, so take this, like take this antidepressant, it sounds to me like you're depressed. And I'd be like, wow, thanks, doc. Like it didn't, and they're like, oh, take antidepressants and stuff like that. And it's kind of hard because you get Twitch. That's why I like talking to you about it, because you understand this sphere, you get this entertainment business. When a lot of these doctors, maybe I'm just seeing the wrong ones, they just don't get any of it. I mean, you even understand my trauma and what I went through last year. You witnessed it, you saw it, and I know that you've also gone through stuff on streams as well, so you get me more. When a lot of these doctors and people will be like, well, what the hell's Twitch? Like, oh, you could, is it like, YouTube? And it's just like, they just don't get it. I sound like a 14-year-old saying it about my parents, but like they just don't get it. Like, it's like easy for a doctor to be like, okay, so you're in finance, you're depressed because you sold the stock wrong. Like, okay, like let's talk about it. When for me it's like, yeah, dude, like this happened and this guy said this and then this post got to here and this guy is, they're just like, they just don't get it, and they're just like, they sit there and nod their head, and I'm like, all right. And it's
What
weird.
do they
I've
say?
actually, huh?
What do they say?
Uh,
How do they understand what's going on in your life?
Well, the person I saw first was a woman, and she really did not get anything on the internet. It's almost like she was your aunt, and she was just like, oh, I was just churning butter yesterday. Like, what's going on here? And I was talking to her about like, like, yeah, so this person said this, and maybe I just like talk too fast and my ADHD brain goes everywhere, but they're just like, sounds like you got a lot going on. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And then the problem is with all these therapists is like, I'm trying to get these appointments and they are just booked forever. They're like, yeah, I can't do anything for like 2 months. Then I'm going to Costa Rica. So I'll see you in like, next year. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to do this. And it's the same thing for my psychologist. I have a psychologist I would see for medication because I was on antidepressants for so long. And he's like, you sounds like you're sad. I'm like, I didn't know. I could have just talked to myself in OBS and got that one. And he's like, so take this and we'll see you in a month. And I'm like, what the fuck is like, doesn't feel the connection. But that's why I like talking to you, is because you get me.
Well, I mean, I think so. I think I understand something else. So let me ask you something. Does Twitch chat understand you the best?
In a lot of ways, yeah, they were there.
Yeah, so I think this whole thing about streaming less, I think we've missed it. So here we are talking about wellness and whatever, but I think that this is where you find connection.
It is. That's true.
I mean, you talk about 100 hours a week and wanting to not do that, and you say, how am I going to fill up 90 hours of the day? I don't think it's about filling up time. I think it's about loneliness. Who are you going to be with for 90 hours of the week if you don't stream?
Tips out, and I don't want to do that.
I don't know what that means.
It's my boss. It's OTK.
And then I think the other thing is that...
But don't you think that's like not good long term to rely on a chat?
Yes. But, I mean, it's not good long term, but like, I mean, now I think this reconceptualizes a lot, right? Because what I'm seeing now is, okay, we're talking about, okay, what am I going to do for 100 hours a week? And you're telling me that if you close your eyes for like 30 seconds, you start having suicidal thoughts. And so what I'm wondering is, if you're not streaming 100 hours, how close do you get to whatever that fucking blackness is? Because it sounds like it's pretty damn close. Doesn't take a whole lot to get there. But the one fun part about this is My thing that I dislike the most. Are you in a space to listen to what I have to say right now?
Oh yeah.
Thing that I dislike the most about streaming is that I don't get to hug people.
Oh, why? Why?
Because we're on the internet and you can't hug someone over the internet.
Why? Because it's not. What do you mean?
I mean, like physically, I'm in one location
Oh, okay.
and you're in another location.
Okay.
But what I'm happy about
Sounds
today is
stupid.
that we're gonna hug. I'm gonna give you a hug.
In regards to the whole closing your eyes thing, it's. I don't want to describe it. It's just. It is better, so I don't like to hone on it and be like, oh well, blah blah blah. It's better. Just leave it at that. It's not. I don't think it's getting worse. I think it's getting better, but yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, so I think whatever's down there, like, so usually when we're going through some kind of traumatic experience, what our mind does is buries it. So this is something that I'm very careful about recommending meditation when I have a patient with trauma, because what you're doing is tearing down the walls of the mind. And so whatever is lurking down there kind of comes up. So 60% of people have at least one traumatic experience. I don't think we realize how, I mean, now we know, but we were surprised to discover how common it is on the research side.
It was really nice not being the 60%. You know that? It was really. It was
really
a good
is.
life.
Yeah. I too have been hunted, so I kind of know what that's like.
That's why I like talking to you. I know you know.
Yeah,
It's.
You know, the thing that surprised me the most is how little it mattered everything I had done before that. So there was this kind of idea, I had this very naive idea that, okay, I've spent 7 years studying to become a monk in India. I'm arguably a decent meditator. I'm a medical doctor. I trained at Harvard Medical School, of all places, so I understand trauma. I studied Eastern medicine. I know things about yoga and mind-body practices to lower my cortisol level. Man, did all that shit go out the window.
I, helped a lot of OnlyFans models grow their careers, and, it all went out the window. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I didn't follow the reference, but
I was just making a joke. You're actually a good human being. I'm just a loser. But everything goes out the window, and
yeah,
they don't care, and they're like, yep, that's it. You're done. You're a horrible one. Literally nothing else I did. I mean, that's why I have a community still, and they stuck by me, is because they're just like, Miz is not a bad guy, but the world just wants to see you burn because it's fun. And when I was happening to you, I was like, fuck all these people. Like, they have no idea who you are. And it killed me because I was like, this dude literally is everything good for the world of Twitch and the internet and trying to help people, and just one fucking video. Just some.
I mean, yeah. Anyway, I appreciate the sentiment. I really do. It means a lot to me.
Mm.
But I think one of the things that we have to learn as content creators is the internet is allowed to have its opinions. Right? And I think a big part of this, and this is something that a lot of streamers need to work on, is like you have to develop like an identity that is independent of like who you are as a streamer. And the problem is when you do this for 100 hours a week, you don't have a chance for that.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm lucky I'm lucky in so many ways compared to y'all, because I was grown up before I started streaming.
So was I.
I was 36 when I started
Okay,
streaming.
yeah, maybe you're really more grown up.
I was married. I had 2 kids, and I had a career. So
I had a job at Vanguard. Yeah, no.
Cool. Not to say I'm not trying to flex on you.
No, but you're. I mean, yeah.
I just mean that, like, so I went through my trials and tribulations when I was in my 20s, much like you, and then like I kind of got centered, and I was able to heal outside of the internet, which the internet makes it hard. Like,
why are people doing this?
And
to
not
me?
just for streamers. I think even people who are like viewers are hard. It's hard because
I'm getting one guide. It's one person.
like if